Welcome to the Dean Blechman Show, live from Long Island. Free-flowing talk with a charismatic, down-to-earth host. Join Dean as he interviews and chats freely with his guests, ranging from superstar athletes to politicians, industry titans, and everyday folk with fascinating life stories. Dean educates, entertains, and most of all, touches people's lives. You're listening to the Dean Blechman Show, live from Long Island.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dean Blechman Show. This is your host, Dean. We're here in the studio with senior correspondent Scott Morell. Hello, Scott.
How you doing, Dean?
Anthony Lacauzi, how are you, senior correspondent?
Very good, very good. Glad to be with you guys again.
Good. Going over to the UK, our investigative reporter, senior correspondent, Ria Bowe. Good morning, Ria.
Hi, guys. Hi, Dean. Don't we sound senior today?
We sound great. Glad to have everybody here. The discussion today is going to be about the documentary, The Great Culling, which is a movie documentary about fluoride and the water systems. Let me send it over to Ria. Ria, if you could open it up, please.
Hi, guys. Firstly, thank you for joining us. Sorry about my sarcasm straight away. I'll turn that down a little bit.
No, you can turn it up, Ria, please.
Okay.
With the C team, the C level.
Yeah, correspondents, though, aren't we?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, it makes me feel old. Maybe that's not a good thing. Anyway, so we're looking at a movie called The Great Culling. Not sure about the title, but still an interesting documentary nevertheless, regarding fluoride in the US water supply. So that's what it is, what people's take on fluoride is, what we've learned about fluoride. I give the three boys here a documentary to watch, all sort of a bit controversial, and people don't know too much about fluoride. So we've all been on a big learning curve. Before I just go into a quick rundown, I just want to comment about the last MMR show that we did. As we now know, we was behind the curve. There are some links below the MMR video bringing it a lot more up to date, but we since found out, because we did a call to action, and we, for all the best will in the world, it turns out Congress has already known about the MMR controversy regarding the leaked information. Brian Hooker is still fighting the cause. Ironically, lives in California where they've mandated it, so he's still fighting the cause, but the original source of the information that was leaked, turns out he never stopped working for the CDC. We don't think. He's kind of gone to ground and gone quiet. There's a couple of links below the video. So that's just making the MMR. On to today, fluoride in the water supply. I'll give the boys a documentary, and there's a list that I'm about to read out very briefly of the people that talk, that they go to for advice on hydrofluorosilicic acid, or what's called fluoride. We have one, David Kennedy down in San Diego. He's a biochemist, physiology. Another PhD, organic chemist. We have a long-time senior prof, Paul Connett, an English guy, been teaching in the US, and is environmental health and toxicology. And Dr. James Rota, DDS, biological dentist, and Dr. Laura Presley, PhD, chemist. So they're the people that are voicing their opinion on the fluoride in your water supply. So I'll just do a direct question to each one of you first before we go open floor. Anthony, what was poignant to you as you looked through the documentary, darling?
Well, I've followed the topic for quite some time now, at least the last 5 or 6 years. So I was aware of the situation, but really what stood out to me were some of the things that I found out that I did not know as I began to dig deeper about how long this really has been going on, why it's been going on, and how it ties into conversations that have been happening over the past 200 years among some very high-level people, we'll call it, and I'll get more into that as we go into the show.
Okay, no problem. And Dean, anything was poignant to you?
What was poignant to me, Ria, is not so much the documentary, to initially have an opinion about the documentary, about what my opinion is. What came to mind, and I hear both political candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, there's constant dialogue on terrorism and security here in this country. Obviously the economy as well. But I personally, when I saw that documentary, what I think's probably the biggest story here in the United States, in America, is the Flint, Michigan water crisis that's happened up in Flint. I mean, for the audience that really doesn't have a full understanding of the Flint water crisis, I mean, I went right to the Wikipedia page of this, and I just want to read some of it. The Flint, Michigan water crisis is a drinking water contamination issue in Flint, Michigan, that started in April of 2014. And after Flint changed its water source from treated Detroit Water and Sewerage Department, which was sourced from Lake Huron as well as the Detroit River, to the Flint River, to which officials had failed to apply corrosion inhibitors, its drinking water had a series of problems that culminated with lead contamination, creating a serious public health danger. The corrosive Flint River water caused lead from aging pipes to leach into the water supply, causing extremely elevated levels of the heavy metal neurotoxin. In Flint, between 6,000 and 12,000 children have been exposed to drinking water with high levels of lead, and they may experience a range of serious health problems due to the change in water source. That's what came to mind as soon as you brought up the topic of fluoride and looking at this documentary, The Culling Water. That's what came to mind, that I feel right up there. Number one crisis here in America has to do with the water systems, and that crisis is just a tremendous casualty that happened in Flint, Michigan.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I have some background on Flint, Michigan. Good call there, Dean. Scott, where are your thoughts?
Well, I've been looking at this in great detail ever since I watched The Great Culling of Water in 2013. And to be frank with you, I'm seeing a lot of debate on both sides of the aisle on this, and I think we should explore it a little bit more. I don't think the science is very crystal clear yet. In some areas, it might be a little bit more clear, but I realize that there is pretty much only 8 countries in the world that put fluoride in their water supply. We're one of 8, I think Australia and so forth. I don't think a European country does, actually. And the countries that do have some science behind supporting the evidence that 0.7 milligrams per liter of fluoride is actually important because it prevents tooth decay. There might be some other things with too much of it, and you could have calcium buildups, they call it, and other things that would not be so good for teeth, the yellow coloring. But I would like to also discuss and put a little backspin on this, on the other evidence that shows that there is not enough absolute evidence to completely get rid of all fluoride. Now, I know the one of the big problems, I would have to agree, is hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a byproduct of limestone when water is going down the mines and going into these sinking ponds, and then they have to release it, and it goes into drinking water. And that is definitely a problem because it's a one-size-fit-all. And I actually think that word is a fantastic tongue twister, which could cause problems down the line with the tongue and the lips. Trying to say that word. But having said that, I think I'm looking forward to this discussion with you, Rhea, because I've been really doing research throughout the world, and I'm seeing a little bit on both sides of this.
Hey, Scott, no problem at all. Is hydrofluorosilicic acid.
Nice.
Yeah,
It's
not easy. She's been saying it.
Rhea, you say that so well and easily. Very
Dr.
fluent.
Bo, paging Dr. Bo.
Silly Nana. No, okay. So I've learned that I sent you another link this morning. There's kind of 3 different types of acid. Fluoride. You've got sodium fluoride. You've got the salt from sodium fluoride, and then you've got this horrible byproduct from metal smelting, aluminium works, or as you say, aluminum. and that's exceedingly toxic, contains arsenic, and that's what's going in the water supply. To pick up on your points, Scott, we go to an open floor now, is if you went to any chemist and you distribute a drug, never mind something as toxic as what it is, one size fits all doesn't exist. It just doesn't. So if you have, say, a 20 stone man, the dose that he needs to be effective in any medicine would be different to a 6-month-old baby because of body mass, autonomy, and everything. It's all very different. So there's a pretty strong argument there as to, well, how can you do one size fits all? So we're just going to move on. So that's just picking up on the point. Let me get my paperwork. So 80% of cities are fluoridated, and San Diego have just a few years ago, lost the battle, and they fought hard not to get it in the water supply, but it's ended up in San Diego as well. And 73% of the population is fluoridated. So guys, what was your take on the actual chemicals that are going in from the plants down in Florida, which recently, because of the acid, and I spoke to you guys briefly, and it was brief, that a massive sinkhole has opened up in Florida from a company called Mosaic, who supplies the hydrofluorosilicic acid that goes in your water supply. So that was during the week, but apparently you guys haven't heard of that, which is pretty amazing. 215 million gallons has just dropped into the earth and into the water table down in Florida from the plant who supplies the fluoride for your water supply. So what did you make of the actual chemical hydrofluorosilicic acid? Guys, open floor.
Well, like the gentleman Mike Adams says in the movie, let's look at the science and look at what does fluoride and the byproducts and chemical spin-offs of fluoride, what does it do to the human body? And they clearly state in there, and if you do further research, you'll see some of the things. Inactivates over 62 enzymes, increases the aging process, disrupts the immune system, causes genetic damage, interrupts DNA repair, increases arthritis, and these are things that, from what I've found, are factual. So Scott, when you said before too that the science isn't clear, I mean, I'd like you to elaborate, because to me it was as clear as day. Increased cancer rates upon further research that I did, increased heart disease, lower fertility rates, earlier menstrual cycles in women. And then going back on over the last 50 years, you have 1 in 6 children have either some type of neurological or developmental disorder, such as autism, ADD, and I don't think that that's a coincidence that we've had these problems emerge ever since these fluoridation programs have come about. And unless these studies are all BS, I don't know how much more science you could get to substantiate it. So,
well, yeah, there was let's call it a trial in Calgary City in 2011, and what they did is they decided to take out fluoride from their drinking water and see the effects of children's teeth at the time. And what they noticed was a surge in teeth decay compared to Edmonton, Canada, which kept the fluoride in the city. So if we're just looking at the narrow part of teeth decay, I think the evidence is sort of clear just based on that sample size. And I'm trying to find...
I agree with that. I do, because fluoride does kill bacteria in the mouth. I'm sure we could all agree based on research we've done, which is why they use it in dental care products, because it kills the bacteria as soon as it hits it. It's totally lethal to the bacteria, which then again brings me to, if it can kill bacteria on contact in the mouth, hence less cavities, what is it doing to other cells in our body? Because bacteria is made up of cells, just like we're made up of cells. So I have to believe, even if there was not any science done on this, and there wasn't any research done on this, just the fact that it can kill bacteria in the mouth on contact, you have to believe that it's damaging the cells that are in our body. So using it, to me, if you're using it in dental products, to add it to the water and actually consume it just seems ridiculous, because, we aren't in the 1600s, and, I don't know when toothpaste was invented, but we have dental care products that we can use for our mouth. So,
Here's the other side I'd like to bring up. 2 points. One, there was a report May of 2013, Rhea, Anthony, from the National Fluoridation Information Service, and it really was sponsored by the Australian and New Zealand government, and they talked about the positives and negatives with fluoridation. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I would like to just read this small little paragraph, which says, conclusion from cancer registry evidence. The analysis confirms that osteosarcoma is extremely rare in New Zealand, with only 127 new cases registered during this period, averaging 14.1 per year. The peak age is 10 to 19 years for both sexes. These rates indicate that there is no difference in the rates of osteosarcoma cases between areas with CWF and I'm trying to find what CWF. CWF stands for Community Water Fluoridation for both sexes, findings which are consistent with the two international studies. And the implication of more robust study analysis is to be undertaken of the possible relationship between osteosarcoma cases and CWF data in New Zealand. So that's something that could rebut it. And I wanted to bring this up also to both of you. We all know that back in the ages, people, famous people, they, besides being killed in a knight's battle, they normally lived to like 30 to 50 years old. And I don't think they had, just like you said, I don't think they had fluoride in the water then. And as bad as things might be, the average age has constantly increased through medical science and so forth. So how do you square that we're living now, 70 is considered, the new 50, and we're living up until 80 and 90 years old, and with all this fluoride? How do you square those two?
Well, I think you're comparing apples to bananas here. I mean, of course we're living longer. We have advances in medicine, but I'm sure if we had research from the 16, 17, and 1800s, and we could hold it parallel to research now, because the research that they have since they've been able to do it show increased cancer rates, increased heart disease, lower fertility rates. So yeah, we may be living longer, but that still doesn't eliminate the fact that we have increased health problems.
I'm not understanding that. So why are we living longer if we're putting these toxics in our body?
Well, that's like saying that, we're not going to live longer because everyone's going to be affected by this the same way. I mean, we're all different people. Like Rhea said before, a 200-pound man and a baby are going to require different doses of medication. But that's still, even that, the fact that we're living longer doesn't detract from the statistics that show we're having increased cancer rates and heart disease and neurological and developmental disorders in children. One doesn't affect the other.
And something has to be the reason why we're living longer. I like to get into, maybe we could get into that another time. But I do agree that, Rhea, what you talked about, the dosage, that it's basically one dose fits all, which we all know is never the case with any medication. And if indeed all these findings are true, then it's a discriminatory governmental policy, because you're putting a certain amount of dosage. And because of the genetic makeup of African Americans and Mexicans in America, they're more genetically predisposed to adverse effects with this, and that would go to support, the problems with fluorinated water. So I just see right now there's a lot of studies on both sides of the aisle, and I have not seen something so definitive yet, except to say I saw the documentary. And I see how poisonous this thing. There's a skull on the containers that have it, and it eats through concrete and everything. And who would want that in their body? But I'm not quite sure if we eliminated that, which is the waste, and we just put. And Rhea, you correct me if there's a a more pharmaceutical type of fluoride, would that possibly be the full answer, that we could get the fluoride for the cavities and we could get rid of the waste, and which causes most of the harm?
Scott, before Rhea answers that question, I just want to go back to, well, first of all, I want to mention that I think this is great, healthy discussion and debate that's going on with you, Scott, and with Anthony. I think it's great for the audience, for the listeners. I just want to, before we go back over to Rhea to answer that question, once again, I just want to state myself, my own opinion. I'm very, very concerned and skeptical about our water supply systems, especially here on Long Island.
In general.
That's different.
Okay.
In general. I've always been skeptical. More than ever right now because of in April with what broke in Flint, Michigan. I mean, that is, it is awful what's happened to those people out there. One of the biggest crises of this decade. And I don't even think enough attention was given to Flint, Michigan when all that broke. I mean, the World Health Organization has come out with a statement since April that, increased blood lead levels, World Health Organization, high blood lead levels can cause learning disabilities, behavioral problems, and mental retardation. That's the World Health Organization has reported that. Here on Long Island, as you know, I think Long Island might be the biggest hotspot, most prevalent region in the country over years. Increase in incidences of breast cancer. Why is all that happening?
Well, if you don't mind, and then I'd really like to bring this back to Rhea, just to wrap this up. I can't agree with you more what you're saying, Dean, about this, but I don't want to mix up the subject matter. Everyone agrees that lead is deadly. Okay, and
they agree fluoride is deadly too.
Well, no,
it's a poison.
No, I understand it's a poison, but when you say lead in water, there's no one that's going to take the other side of it. There's no dentistry that says, "Oh, it's great for the cavity or whatever." The point I'm saying is that the Flint situation had to do with old pipes and lead getting in there.
That's correct.
And so I agree that our water supply has issues, but that's different than the subject matter we're talking about today.
I'm just saying that I understand it was a change of pipes and switching over to water systems.
And lead,
okay?
not fluoride.
It's still a tremendous tragedy, and I think when I hear both presidential candidates, I still think this incident in Flint should have been top of mind.
I think we all agree.
More than ever.
We all agree about that.
What I'm just saying is what took place, I'm skeptical about our water supply. That's all. Okay, let's go back over to Rhea. Rhea, are you there?
I am here. Love it, guys. Go on, get it going. Right. Okay, so moving on. Firstly, the fluoride in toothpaste is generally sodium fluoride. Okay, so let's just clear that up. Is sodium fluoride in still bad? Still poison and all that kind of stuff, but it's sodium fluoride, and the fluoride in the water is coming from the chemicals down there in Florida where this big sinkhole has opened up where the acid ate through the earth, and that's what's in the water. Briefly, to answer your question, when you took it somewhere else, Scott, saying, well, why are we living longer, as in it was a rebuttal to the fact that there's fluoride in the water, I think your argument is weak in the fact that surgical procedures have come on massively in the last 50 years. You have the advent of penicillin, which has saved more lives than you can count. You have general education on food, what to eat, what not to eat. So it really is a weak rebuttal in terms of the fluoride argument, I think.
Okay, so
the thing that people need to know that underneath that word fluoride, sorry.
After you're done, we're going to bring it over to Scott again, Rhea. I'm sorry.
Do you want me to stop?
No, continue.
Sorry, I thought you said something.
No, disregard it.
No, I think it's just, you're far over in the UK, and there's been an interception of frequency today. So continue.
Okay, so I think the argument is weak, Scott, in terms of the fluoride arguments. Yes, people are living longer. So you've heard that wrap up. And the thing that you need to know underneath that word fluoride, the real name is in the water supply, hydrofluorosilic acid. And in that is arsenic. So you've not got to remember, underneath that name fluoride is the name arsenic. So when you say it's okay, where's the argument to put arsenic into the water supply? I would say to you, where are your thoughts on putting arsenic into the water supply?
Okay, well, you bring up a great point, and let me address that. The surgical procedures and the advancement in science probably outweighs the downsides of the fluoride, and that's doing it. So I think what your argument is, let's say the average age is 78 without the fluoride, it might be 83, for instance. So I could appreciate that argument. I understand the two different kinds of fluorides, and I don't know how you would feel if just keeping it in the toothpaste, obviously not swallowing it and putting on very good warning signs, and then addressing that tongue twister, as we call it, the hydrofluoric acid in the water supply, which does have arsenic. But what I found, and this is what I like to really get into, there have been studies where they have not, and I will take it. I will take a look at my papers as other people talk, that they have not shown evidence of cancer rates increasing because of this. Now, it doesn't make sense to me. I would agree with you that who would ever want to drink arsenic? But they've had studies, and maybe they're influenced by money. And we've talked about that in other episodes, that big money is changing policies or influencing policies, and maybe there is a cover-up. But there are studies that suggest that it has not shown increases in cancer or arthritis, even though the documentary does. And I'll try to find that for you, and I would like to be able to debunk it because it doesn't make sense.
So unless someone's going to say that arsenic is a natural product.
Right.
Okay.
Listen,
I normally don't say when I go to a diner, let me have like a hamburger and a side of arsenic.
Okay, so is it my understanding what Rhea is trying to get across is that this higher quality of fluoride that's used in toothpaste, mouthwashes, and dental fluoride treatments, why isn't that the higher grade fluoride used in the water systems? Is that correct, Rhea?
Well, it is correct in the fact that it's about 12 times more expensive, but
Right.
also because of there's 100 chemicals in fluoride, one of them being arsenic that we would know. And the arsenic is one of the byproducts from the hydrochloric acid, which we all know the name of, that's part of the smelting plants and everything. It's completely illegal to dump it at sea. Getting rid of this stuff isn't easy. Sorry, Dean, go on.
Rhea, I did some research and I came across some written material from the Canadian COF, Canadians opposed to fluoridation. And I see quoted a Dr. J. William Hersey back in 2000. He's a senior chemist at the U.S. EPA headquarters, and he states, if this stuff gets out into the air, it's a pollutant. If it gets into the river, it's a pollutant. If it gets into the lake, it's a pollutant. But if it goes right straight into your drinking water system, it's not a pollutant. And he says that's amazing.
how is that possible? I
How
mean,
does that work?
and you know what too, though? I mean, going back to, what Scott had mentioned about the fluoride, if you look on toothpaste now, it says, if ingested, contact poison control. Now, why the hell would that be on the label of your toothpaste if it wasn't bad for you? It doesn't say on your coffee, on your Folgers coffee can, if you ingested raw coffee beans, contact poison control. I mean, come on.
Hey guys, right. Let's just rein it in a second. Okay, so I'm gonna move it forward out of this. That there's an argument for both sides, and it's about raising awareness about the name fluorides. Okay, and what is underneath the name fluoride. That's what it's about raising awareness. And anybody listening, write in the box below and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. And if you can bring any more information to this debate, hey, just write it down and enlighten us all, really. But fundamentally, there's a labeling problem in the US, right? Whether you agree, personally, I think drinking water should, well, can I just have it uncontaminated, please? That's my view on it. Okay. I'd like that. And so just nice, clean drinking water would be fine. So outside of that, you have a labeling problem in the fact that somehow it doesn't have to be labeled.
Yep.
So what do you think about, would you like to be informed about what you're drinking, guys? Open floor.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, I
Go
can't.
ahead, Scott.
I can't. I'm sorry, Dean. I can't agree more with you on that. We should always be informed about what we're ingesting. United States law, and I'm sure this is in the European Union and the UK. I don't know if they're out or in. Who knows where they are right now today. But we all want to have more information on calories and carbohydrates and unsaturated fats, and there definitely should be the warning signs on something that could be a poison, just like Anthony talked about the toothpaste.
Well, why is it on toothpaste that that it's a poison? But then they'll label it in Europe and they'll tell you how many parts per million of metals are in their water,
right?
Like in the documentary. But here on my Poland Spring, Dean's looking at the bottle now. Nowhere on there does it say anything about the sodium, the lead, anything that's in there.
People,
no parts per million.
And you're right, and it's all about the money. I agree with you, and they're trying to subrogate that somehow.
Well, not so much about the money, but why can they label it where Rhea is,
No.
but they can't label it here for us? Why are they not telling us?
Because they're afraid that the consumers will be concerned about it, and which is a big money interest trying to suppress this information. So I agree that if you're having what we all agree is a toxic, arsenic, and it's being forced on you, that is not right. And even if the conclusions are not there specifically, we should all err on the side of caution. So just like you said, Rhea, we have, our bodies are sovereign bodies, and it should not be inflicted on us that we must ingest it. Give us an option at least while we're still debating this, and the option should be in toothpaste also, non-fluoride toothpaste or fluoride toothpaste, and that would solve the problem.
Okay, let's push it on to the next bit. If I just quickly, they have put this in the water supply, largely sort of unknown, and people don't really understand what fluoride is. The name doesn't sound super nasty or anything. It's not generally associated with something horrid. So this is quite important. But fundamentally, and it is fundamentally, they're treating it like a medical thing to treat teeth. Okay, so it's a medical assertion within a water supply, one fits all, and even genetically it doesn't work. But yet within the Constitution, it kind of says that you are entitled to informed medical choice, doesn't it? As a right, as your freedom that your ancestors fought for, part of it was informed medical consent. So when you go and see a doctor, he says to you, look, I suggest you take this. This is the good bits that could help, and these are the bad bits. And you go, well, actually, I think I'll give that a miss. And he turns around and says to you, no, you must have this. He would be struck off, wouldn't he? How can you argue that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The doctor would lose his license in a heartbeat forcing you to take something. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So
I sort of take issue with the labeling. Go on, Scott.
Scott wants to go ahead and speak. Go ahead, Scott.
I agree that, when you go to the doctor and they're prescribing something to you, well, there's a mutual decision. Hey, do you need it? What do you think? What are the benefits? What are the side effects? There's this discussion going on with any kind of drug. This is a drug and a possible, I will call a probable poison, okay? No matter what the amount is per liter, that is being forced on you, and in no other circumstance that I could think of that you ingest or even take a shower, that you're being forced to have a drug being forced on you, and the dosage, according to them, is irrelevant when we all know that dosages are completely relevant. So there's a lot of problems with this, Rhea, which I'm open to, and I agree. I think I think the smart middle would be to only have obviously at any point the fluorinated, the pharmaceutical fluorinated component in water as an option. Okay, get rid of the waste because there's nothing good about that. I mean, it eats up concrete. God knows what it's going to do to my intestines. And then have the non-fluorinated. Give that as an option.
Well, it shouldn't be in the water, period. Like, let's look at the history and understand how the narrative even came about, why it's even in the water, why one day it wasn't there, and then all of a sudden the next day it was there. If you go back to World War II when we were processing uranium, obviously for nuclear bombs, nuclear weapons, they used fluoride to process uranium, and in the exhaust that came out of these uranium processing facilities was fluoride. And it was poisoning the towns and communities of people that lived around or near these uranium processing facilities, and it was making them deathly ill. And because of that, I believe this was right around the 40s or 50s. I don't have my dates exactly right. I don't know if it was during the middle of the war, towards the end, after. But a lot of these lawsuits had arisen because of these people getting sick in and around these uranium processing facilities. So what they had to do was change the narrative for people to give them the idea that fluoride's not bad, okay, to basically squash these lawsuits that had arisen. So they started to add it to the water to tell people, well, okay, if it's in the water, then how bad could it be, right? Mm-hmm. The government would never put something in the water if it was bad for us. So when you look at the history and you look at the reason, well, why are they putting this in the water? That is how it started. It started to take credibility away from these lawsuits, to say, well, they're putting it in the water. It can't be that bad for me. And they actually had hired one of the best. He's known as the father of advertising. He's one of the best propagandists of all time. His name's Edward Bernays. And in 1929, he had said this, which I'm going to read this quote, which I think takes us to a whole another level with this discussion. But he comes out and he says, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. Wow. So this is obviously a brilliant man. I mean, he was the guy that that made the concept of buying a new car fashionable. Prior to him coming into the auto industry, there was no ads with pretty women driving Chevy convertibles with the top down. The guy was a marketing genius, but he was also very connected at some of the top levels of government and society, and he knew exactly how to formulate mass opinions. And then he comes out with this quote where he's basically telling you, listen, a few big dogs call the shots around here, and you're going to believe it because that's the way we're programming you. So ties us right back to, these lawsuits, him being brought in and hired to change the narrative, saying, okay, let's add it to the water. People won't question it because everyone's going to trust that this must be a good thing, and we're going to show that it's good for cavities and good for your teeth and all these other things. But when you go even back in history again, around that same time period, and you look at the research, they were using fluoride in the water in the gulags in the Soviet Union to keep the prisoners docile because of the effects that it has on the brain. They were using it in the concentration camps in Germany. And why? I mean, the reason wasn't so these prisoners wouldn't get cavities. The reason was because they knew the real science that this was going to poison the people and affect their mental capacity, and had nothing to do with preventing the prisoners from getting cavities. I mean, let's call a spade a spade.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. You want to add anything?
Yes,
Jim?
Rhea brought up earlier one thing that makes a lot of sense, and that's what is the optimal fluoridation level? She had mentioned one size fitting all, and I think there's a little bit of a failure to really value and control an individual's appropriate dose. I mean, as she said, who controls for age, body mass, medical condition, lifestyle, or any other individual uniqueness pertaining to the amount of water that's consumed and the ability to tolerate fluoride, between lead and arsenic and mercury, all these things. When it comes to the controls and one size fits all, that I'm skeptical about.
I think the appropriate level is 0, just like
well,
for lead, it's
Anthony,
0.
my feeling is since we are every day, and especially children, unavoidably ingesting more fluoride today than ever before from multiple sources, like food and drink and mouthwash and toothpaste, dental products, and environmental pollution. Why do we still need to top up with fluoridated water?
Exactly.
That's my question.
Exactly. Well, I could get into that, but Rhea, before I do you have a response to that? Because I know it ties into something that you and I both know about.
Anthony, before even Rhea asked the question, my also to top it off is how much fluoride does one need to personally ingest today? I mean, you picked up the bottle of water here, Poland Springs. Yeah. Sharon and I must buy 20 cases a week that we go through that. We have gallons in our pantry that
5 gallon.
So I'm gonna ask Rhea the big question. Go over in the UK. Rhea, how do you feel about the water that I'm drinking? The water industry, the bottled water industry, is a multi-billion-dollar business.
Wow. It springs to mind to me. If you'd have said to my dad, my late father, that, say, wind the clock back 15, 20 years ago, that there'll be companies making money out of selling water, he would have just laughed at me. He would have just laughed at me, honestly. He would have. He'd have gone, you're kidding.
It's like selling air, right?
Sort of, yeah, right, and all that kind of stuff. Well, people have spoke about that, but we won't do that. Right, Anthony, regarding the subject you bring up, you took it to a broad area there, and I would say to cope with these kind of subjects, you need to keep it focused on, in this case, each show, but each topic, to understand what is going on. Now, fundamentally, with the deliverance of a medicine one size fits all is a pretty solid argument. My opinion aside, I'd sooner have uncontaminated water, but one size fits all. So here's some damning stuff, right? They put that stuff in baby water, okay? Well, babies don't have teeth, not for a while.
Right.
So what's that about then? So, that's a bit iffy. And what's more, it's not labelled. And your water that you're drinking, Dean, as far as I know, when they did the tests on all the products, bearing in mind, we're just looking at as if you was drinking a litre of water or a pint of water, and how much fluoride is in that. It's in the food you eat. All the food you eat is made with that water, and it's in all those sort of fizzy pop drinks. Anything that you consume, that fluoride is in. So again, one size fits all? Don't think so. If you've got someone that eats and drinks barely anything, the dose is going to be pretty different.
Well, Rhea,
from someone who consumes a large amount.
Scott
But that
has-
bottled water is not labelled.
We're going to go over to Scott now. He's got something to say.
yeah, it's really interesting that this is a debate and why we can't have consensus, where it doesn't seem like there are big interests that really have a play. We're not talking about the United States. We're not talking about Great Britain. We're talking about, for instance, New Zealand, where they had that study, and both sides of the aisle talked about it, and the opponents consider it a potentially dangerous additive which has contaminants including arsenic, while supporters say it's a natural trace mineral which protects teeth. Some fears over fluoridation of water arise from beliefs it has an impact on cancer rates, specifically bone cancer, osteosarcoma, or the intellectual development of children. Fluoride accumulates in bones, so the risk of bone defects or fractures has also been extensively analyzed. There are published studies suggesting links between fluoride and bone defects, but the society has questioned their validity. The Ministry of Health and dentists generally support water fluoridation due to its protective effect against both decay. So I'm not understanding why the ADA and dentists are so pro this when there could be a possibility or maybe a probability that there is a poison in there. Why? What is their motive for this? I can understand the stuff, the waste, like Cargill and other big industrial manufacturers in the United States wanting to dump it because it's cheaper and so forth. But what about medical professionals? Why are they so pro this right now?
Good question, Scott. Let's go over to Rhea on that. Rhea, what's your answer to Scott's question?
It is a good question. And those lobbying bodies, once upon a day, the US government had a genuine arm of the government that were scientists. Well, that was taken apart. So the real scientists were oinked out and they were replaced with lobbying groups. And so some of the answer may lie there. And also, you can't get away from the fact that babies don't have teeth. So, what good's it doing a baby? And with those kind of polls, you have to look at the validity. In the documentary we watched, we had 6 professionals saying completely the opposite. So it's not a straightforward case of all dentists say this is good, but it's still not informed medical choice, is it? It's still an enforced thing. No one decided.
But the dentist
as a person.
Yes, Rhea. But the dentist could come out and say, I'm ambivalent about it. I understand both sides, and it always seems like 4 out of 5 dentists, those commercials recommend. Why hasn't that changed with all this evidence? What is it in for the dentist? Forget about the lobbying group of the ADA. And then the other question I have is, you talked about the water for I think Anthony or you talked about the water for the children. I found it astonishing in the documentary that the mothers were actually looking for fluorination in the water. They said, "Oh, this water, Gerber's, has 90% fluorination." So what is that about? Forget about the non-choice. They actually say, "Give me more of it."
Wow.
Well, that's the narrative, isn't it? That is, if one's belief is that fluoride is good, then you would look for something you feel is good.
Okay, that makes sense.
They've done a great
job.
job.
Like you say, those adverts.
Anthony has something.
No, she can finish.
Okay, go ahead, Rhea.
Like you said, if they're on a mainstream narrative and the mainstream narrative says, hey, 4 out of 5 dentists say this is good, then they're sold. They only know what they know and they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and that's and the narrative is exactly what that's the narrative that they want us to follow. That's why, like when I read from the quote from Edward Bernays, and again going back into the history, if we now look at and we see all these negative effects from fluoride, and now let's look at what else they've publicly used fluoride for, right? And again, this is not me wearing a tin hat here. This was based on research that I found from digging a little bit deeper, which really started to blow my mind. But Switzerland came out in the 60s and they publicly announced they were adding fluoride to the salt to control fertility rates, and I thought that was amazing. So I dug a little bit deeper, and obviously now we know the effects from different research are lower fertility rates, messing around with women's menstrual cycles, and this ties into the idea of population control, because why else would you want to suppress fertility rates? And the further I looked into this, if you want to call it population control agenda, now they have a very cute term for it. It's called sustainable development, and this idea was first discussed as early as the mid 1800s by Thomas Thomas Malthus, one of the leading thinkers of his time, Francis Galton, Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood, was a student of the teachings and writings of these gentlemen. And this idea of population control has been spoken about at the highest levels of government and society for now over 200 years, with the idea being that there is finite resources on the planet and too many people. Which, obviously I don't know what the statistics are of the resources, and I have to believe if people moved away from cities that we would have plenty of resources, and if the land was properly used and so on. But not to digress, this idea of population control and this idea of if adding fluoride to the water, now they publicly came out in Switzerland in the 60s saying that's why they were doing it. So if that's the real underlying reason why they're doing it here, and they're just making it about the teeth, right? So like the whole idea of dental health, let that be the scapegoat, if you will. Let people believe that's the narrative, but really our secret agenda is now to control the population with this whole idea of sustainable development. And I mean, you had Francis Crick, who started Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories and discovered DNA with James Watson. Julian Huxley, another scientist from that actively spoke about this idea of population control and eugenics. They wrote books about it. A book came out in 1972, commissioned by the Club of Rome, which is basically some of the highest powered businessmen, heads of state, former heads of state in the world. They commissioned a book called Limits of Growth in 1972, where they openly wrote about this stuff. And it amazes me, the deeper that I dug, the more I found factual evidence of very powerful people at the very, very top of the human food chain, if you will, writing about this idea of population control, eugenics, sterilization of the population. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. And some people can interpret it, oh, that's a conspiracy, that's this, that. But do the research. It's factual. It's been written about. I mean, it's insane. It's really insane.
My good friend Anthony, you articulated, you said that very well.
Thank you.
Yes, he mentioned a lot of doctors.
You said that very well. Very well.
Thank you. Very nice.
I'm proud of you. Very well.
I would just like to add something to that. Rhea, it was a few episodes ago that you had, I think we were doing Rhea's Ditties at the time, and you mentioned what's the sustainable rate of population that the Earth can sustain. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think we all got it wrong. And I think you said the number is 500 million. Am I correct?
Oh, no, you
No. Sorry, excuse me. Not 500 million. I think it was, I thought it was 5 billion. Sorry, excuse me. That's what I meant.
Hey, no problem, darling. No problem at all.
Was it 5 billion? Do you remember?
No, it wasn't. We're currently, I mean, who knows the actual numbers to the dead right? I don't know. But we're sitting around 7.5 billion people on the planet, and sustainability is going to run out at 9 billion.
Okay.
So that's where we're at. We're starting to run out of time, guys. Can I just do a quick close, and then we do our close, if you don't mind? I'm going to play a quick audio clip from the movie, which is those doctors' takes, the physiologist, the biochemist, etc., on their take on hydrofluorosilic acid. Just one more time for you there, on their take on it. And then I'm going to just have a quick tell you about the next program that we'll do. So let me just play this audio for you guys, and the people listening that don't have the time to look for the documentary, which is on, again, the controversial page on wickedvid.com. Have a listen to this, guys.
Basically is a hazardous waste byproduct of the manufacture of phosphate fertilizer. It's a mining byproduct.
They dig up this rock. This rock is no good, as is. So you mix it with sulfuric acid, and this produces soluble phosphate. And that's what becomes the fertilizer.
In doing so, they get all this fluorosilicate in there.
It's a byproduct that they can't do anything with. It's a poison. So they sell it and make fluoride out of it.
It was a fraud. It was a scam from the get-go. It is a means of getting rid of fluoride. You allow industry to use your water supply to dispose of their hazardous waste. It's a disposal mechanism.
It's a major industrial waste pollutant. They were trying to dump it into the rivers that were going out into the ocean in Florida. And boy, they stopped that. They said, you're polluting, you're killing the fish, and which they were.
For 100 years, they decimated the local vegetation, crippled the cattle, damaged the citrus groves in Florida.
It was costing them a fortune to handle this as a very serious industrial waste.
And then eventually,
oh, I have an idea. Let's put it in the water supply and we'll get them to take it off our hands. We don't have to pay to get rid of a toxic waste.
And now they're making millions of dollars on what is. If you read it, it'll say what was. Well, I don't care what was. It still is an industrial waste product that is being added as our fluoridating agent.
There you go, guys. There's just a quick take from the movie to give you.
I think Scott has a question to ask.
Yeah, Rhea, that was great, by the way. And normally it is a cost to get rid of a byproduct of a main product that you're producing, for instance, fertilizer. And what you're saying, or what they're saying, is that they not only incurred they thought they were going to incur a cost, but they switched it around and created a profit from their waste. So it was a double bonus. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You heard that they were all doctors, chemists. You know that they kind of know their stuff. They're fighting for the rights of people to become more informed on fluorides. So yeah, they fully did. And what you haven't heard about apparently is in that documentary, there was that guy got the southern accent, has been affected by all the chemicals because he worked for the company, and he took that reporter down to show him. This week, a massive sinkhole opened in that very place in Mosaic and swallowed untreated 215 million gallons that sunk into the water supply down in Florida. That was at the beginning of this week, and apparently you guys haven't heard about that. So, well, there's a thing. 4 out of 5 dentists say it's fine.
Thank you, Rhea. Let's go over to Anthony. I know he has something he wants to say.
I was just going to say, just in response to Scott about and to that clip you did, Rhea, that was amazing. Thank you. And for the listeners that obviously haven't seen this documentary, that was, I believe, taken directly from it, right, Rhea? And I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal, very educational. You all should take the time to watch it. And in rebuttal to not even in rebuttal, but to comment on what you said, Scott, as far as this being a byproduct of manufacturing. Okay, it's part of their natural process to produce these goods that they're producing, and they need to sell it off. Okay, so instead of dumping the excess in the water, just make excess dental care products and give them away to people in countries that don't have it. Give it to just make millions and billions of tubes of toothpaste and give it away to people in third world countries. Then don't dump it in our water. Just ship off dental products to people in places that don't have them.
Well, I mean, no, you're right. First of all, just the concept of getting something that you didn't ask for bothers me tremendously. So I completely agree with that as a solution. I just want to bring one thing. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Rhea. The documentary producer of The Culling Water is a gentleman by the name of Paul Wittenberger. And I read up something a few years ago that was published that he went into production with a gentleman by the name of Steve Anderson, who is the pastor of Faithful World Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. And they produced a documentary called The Marching to Zion. And as I read some of the excerpts, they were... in my opinion, they were full of lies or very fringe elements of the thought of different religions. For instance, some of the things that came out, they were talking scriptural evidence that the Jews are no longer God's chosen people, to claiming that Judaism's Messiah is the Antichrist, to blasphemous teaching of the Talmud and Kabbalah, They talked about the Jews are racist, taking part in the Jews' evil deeds. And then specifically what was really disturbing, and this perpetuated myths, and that's why I just wanted to tie together. Anderson claims that one rabbi stated that stealing was okay. Quote, "That's why the Jews believe it's okay to steal from Gentiles," close quote, continued Anderson, quote, "as long as they don't steal from each other," close quote. Later in the sermon, echoing an ancient anti-Semitic trope, he misrepresents the Kol Nidre, which is the prayer on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, which is Yom Kippur, that Jews say on the Day of Atonement, claiming that, quote, "every contract, agreement, oath, vow that they've made for the last 12 months and for the next 12 months is null and void," which allows them to lie, cheat, steal, and break contracts. Well, that's completely taken out of the context. It allows us in the Jewish religion to recognize that we are human beings that do sin, and it's either intentionally, it says it, either intentionally or unintentionally. So you could have all these unintentional misdeeds towards your fellow man or woman, and it allows you to start the new year by asking for forgiveness. And then finally, they just talk about it's the most wicked, blasphemous work ever written, the Talmud. And finally, he says he claims that the Jews killed Jesus and the Jews blame the Holocaust on Christianity. So what made me look into this a little bit more is that the documentary's producer, Paul Wittenberger, felt that this was an important story to get out. And this is definitely on the fringes of what mainstream societies believe in the Jewish religion.
But what the hell does that have to do with fluoride in the movie?
Well, because it's the same person. So you got to question if this is how he views this, and he wants to bring this to the world as something that we should be looking at about the Jews, wouldn't you think that the person has a certain kind of fixed agenda? And doesn't that put a little credibility away from him?
Well, you can't deny, I don't know what the book is, but the Orthodox Jews openly come out and say that it's okay to take the wives of the Goyim and kill them and do, very terrible things to
I haven't heard
us,
that one.
us non-Jews.
And I don't support them, actually.
So,
I think they live the most hypocritical lives. What they do is they could cheat and steal and do sins with fellow man, and they go to synagogue on a Saturday, and they think they're absolved of everything. So I'm in no way supportive of them, but I just found that to be exacerbating a myth or a stereotype. And so it's coming from the same person. So I sort of question, is he trying to dig up a lot of controversy and resentment towards a lot of institutions? And that just, it's just a little thing.
Anthony, I have a lot of respect for Scott on this area. And your question, I can understand you asking, what does this have to do with fluoride? It might not specifically have to do with fluoride and the debate and conversations we're having about specifically about fluoride. But I feel Scott, as our friend and colleague here on the show, he did his responsible duties, that he looked into the background specifically of a gentleman that was involved in producing this documentary, The Great Culling, and Scott expressed his opinion. Scott couldn't have picked a more appropriate time, considering that we're about 2 weeks away from the High Holy Days of the New Year and Day of Atonement of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So Happy New Year to you.
Thank you very much. And by the way, I'm a secular Jew, and I believe me, I have a lot of critiques about the religion, but this is going to the worst depths of stereotyping. And if they're prepared to do that, I do question some of the publications and some of the documentaries that they do. I just can't accept it as written. I have to be diligent and look at the other side. And I'm not saying they're wrong, because it kind of makes sense, but I tend to be a little circumspect when I look at the body of work.
Fair enough.
Okay, getting back to fluoride, as far as I'm concerned, and I go back once again an hour ago to Flint, Michigan. I think if you take the universe of people out there, I think everybody wants to know what is in the water they drink. Are there any chemicals in the water that we would object to? And a lot of people probably don't know who has full access to the public water supply? I mean, in a nutshell, those are pretty template, boilerplate questions that I think the universe of people need to know. Going back to Rhea. Rhea, what do you have to say?
Hey guys, sort of great debate. Scott, firstly, I think you're right to question it. Everything should be questioned. If you smell a rat, just go and look. So I'm all for it, really.
Great.
The producer, I can see how that would discredit a possible production. I get that, because when you get anywhere near any fringe views, it all, well, to me, it all sounds a bit nuts. But the guy that actually presented it was Chris Maple, wasn't he?
That's true.
That is true. That was actually nothing to do with this other person's point of view.
Absolutely correct.
And so for me to try and wrap up rather than go into a religious thing, which is dangerous grounds, just a quick recap on a few facts. Underneath the word fluoride, there is arsenic. So you have to question whether you want that in there. Secondly, would you like to know what they've done with it and be fully informed on what fluoride is? And there are clearly different fluorides. And again, there is some kind of governing body in your country that looks after you guys. But yet we still have this massive neurological disorders going on in the US within the young. Okay? I'm not saying it's this or whatever, but we looked at the MMR and your people that look after you went, no, it's definitely not that. So they've now put fluoride in your system, so they're convinced it's definitely not that. So we're just going to try and knock them off one by one. And next week, for the next week's show on Dean and the Team Uncensored, we're going to be look at genetically modified organisms, GMOs, in your food. Again, unlabeled, so you don't know if you're eating it or not. So that's what we're looking at. Babies don't have teeth. There isn't one size fits all with fluoride. It's proven to affect your DNA and RNA. So when you reproduce, you don't reproduce the same DNA as the generation before. So that's just sort of my closing to bear in mind. Get informed. If you think it's good, then fine. And don't forget, medically informed choice is something to keep an eye on as well. Back to you, Dean.
Let's bring it back. Thank you, Rhea. Let's bring it back over to Scott. He has something to say.
No, I appreciate that, Rhea. And I think what is special about this show is the full openness of debate. And I think we have such polarization, especially in the United States, where no one's listening to the other side and just conversations go over each other. And by bringing these to the forefront and having our listeners listen to different sides, and we present the facts or the information as best we know, and let they opine and hopefully comment about what we brought to the show. We're certainly bringing things that are important, that can affect everyday lives, and some of them are controversial. And I think that's the beauty of the show. But we like to not be just so one-sided and be in a bubble. We like to present all sides, even though one side we might believe a little bit more. So I think this was a great discussion, and thank you, Rhea, for coming up with the topic and bringing this to the show. I really appreciate it. I think it was a great job.
Hey, no worries, guys. And, knowledge is power. And no matter either way you go, whether you're pro or against, I would like to leave it with, if I could make any influence on a decision, would be the labeling. Could you just please put it on the label so at least people know what they're consuming? Over to you, Dean.
Thank you, Rhea. Thank you, Scott. I concur with both of you. Anthony, before I close the show, do you have anything that you want to say?
No, I thought it was a phenomenal show, and it was great debating with you, Scott, and being part of this. Yeah, so thank you, guys.
Well, listen, I want to thank Scott for being here today in the studio. Anthony, same to you. Rhea, all the way over in the UK. Thank you, Rhea. Great work. And I want to hear from all our listeners. They can reach out to us with the free text number for U.S. residents. It's 631-372-8849. That's 631-372-8849. We'd love to hear from you. Include your name and location, and we will mention you on the show. Please don't forget us on Facebook and hit the subscribe button on the show's YouTube channel. If you would like to leave a comment, use the box below. If you would like to share your story, ideas, and be a guest on the show, go to deanblechman.com and email me directly. I would like to thank all my listeners for being with us today. From all of us at the Dean Blechman Show, have a great day.
You've been listening to the Dean Blechman Show, live from Long Island, New York. From all of us here, we'd like to thank you for tuning in. We look forward to hearing your comments via Facebook, Twitter, Skype, and email. And don't forget, you can visit the webpage anytime for the up-and-coming guest list. From all of us here, have a good evening.